going to be showing you a remake of a design that I did a couple years ago, and I am so impressed by the outcome, just as far as looking back and seeing what I did and then what I did this time. I love doing these remakes of my own work. I think it is a really good way to kind of benchmark how you're doing. A lot of times when you are improving at anything, you don't realize, the day-to-day skill that you're improving. You're getting better and better every single time you do anything. And you don't realize it because it's so incremental. But if you go and you recreate something or you rewatch work from way back when, you can see how much better you are, which is the reason that I did this one. Just to kind of see, you know what, I can do that better, I'm gonna do it better. I hope you like it as much as I do. The link to the original video is in the description box below, so go check for that, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye! So we are going to start off with this gorgeous fiery orange color in the background. It has a little bit of glitter in it, and it just has, like I said, that kind of like crazy fiery energy that Taz embodies. So we're going to be doing that in the background, and then after you have a nice full layer of that over the entire nail, we're going to encapsulate it with a layer of clear acrylic. Another thing that I've noticed between the types of designs that I did 2-3 years ago and the types of designs I'm doing now, just as far as the base goes, is I'm doing longer and longer nails just overall. And I used to use little round nails all the time to sculpt 3D stuff on. And it was always kind of like a trick to see how small I could make things. And now I'm using much larger nails, and not because I'm making things larger as far as the 3D goes, I'm just adding so much more to it. So I'm not making a design that's just one thing, I'm making a design that has extra elements to it, and I love the way that that track is going on just like my personal development goes. I'm adding so many more elements to every design that I do almost. So that's just something that is kind of interesting to see when I go back and look at things that I've done in the past. So to start out my Taz, I'm going to begin with brown acrylic, and I'm going to just kind of work in the top of his head. So Taz's whole body shape is like the top of his head is the first 20%, and then the whole middle 80% is his mouth, and then the bottom of his body is the last, so it's like 20%, 60%, 20% as far as the proportions go, not 80%. Don't mind me. Math is usually something I'm okay at, but right now, apparently not. So we've got our little Taz. We've got the whole big middle section, which is going to be where his mouth takes over. And then I'm going to set this on a nail form backing just at this stage so that I can start sculpting in the arms. So we've got his two arms that are going to be sculpted on a nail form backing. He's slightly turned to the side, so we're getting a little bit of a side profile on him. So one arm is going to be larger than the other. It's going to look a little disproportionate when you're sculpting them, but then once you go and you assemble it and you add the angle where you can see like the angle of his mouth and his eyes, it all just becomes a little bit more obvious, and it doesn't have that kind of awkward, why is one arm so big look to it anymore. So we're going to add this first one. One thing I do want to say about the original nail design I did versus this one is that the arms and hands specifically are so much improved this time over versus last time I did this design, which was just about 2.5 years ago, and I like them both. This one is a little more extreme, it's a little more crazy, and it is really just that much better. And in that original video I did, I also shared this is what I did last time. So this is the third Taz video that I have done. And if you are just starting out your nail art, career, your nail art hobby, whatever you want to call it, if you're just starting out, or even if you've done this for a little while and you're just feeling a bit discouraged, first thing, know we've all been there. Every single artist out there in the world, whatever their medium is, whether it's nails or canvas or cake or marble stone, whatever the medium is, whoever the artist is, everybody has those moments where like, wow, this is horrible. This is terrible. I can't believe I did this. I can do so much better. Or, whatever those nagging thoughts are that sneak into your mind. And so if you're making something and it isn't, your favorite, that's okay. In fact, that's the time when you learn the most, when you do something that you just do not like. You really can learn from that experience. So as discouraging as it may be, as frustrating it is, that's the big one for me, is it's so frustrating when you do something you're like, oh man, this is horrible. But as horrible, frustrating, exhausting as it is to have a design that really just isn't that great, it happens to everybody. Everybody goes through it. Everybody gets through it. And what is horrible to you today probably would have been absolutely amazing to you a year ago, because your expectations on yourself, your demands on yourself and your art increase. Every time you do something really cool, you then expect that of yourself every single time. And so if you do something that's mediocre, you really are going to hate it. And as soon as you kind of get past that whirlwind of this is horrible, this is terrible, and try to change the mentality to, okay, not my best work. How could have I improved this? And then apply that knowledge to the next time you make something. You're really going to see it. And like I said, recreate something you did a year ago and see how much you improve, because, or 2 years ago or 3 years ago, whatever the time frame is, because you will be so impressed. Like even if it's still maybe not perfect to you, you'll really see the transition, and it's so just encouraging to see it. So once you have those arms sculpted and tail, by the way, we're going to be gluing them into place on the snail. You can really see the different sized arms right there. It's really obvious. But it is right. It's the right proportion for them. The one that's bigger, push it a little bit forward when you glue it down so that it kind of sits a little bit more towards the front of the nail. It kind of has a little bit more of an angle out. Glue the tail in place, and then continue use your brown acrylic, which is like a milk chocolate brown. And we're going to be adding all of the little kind of securities on this. We're going to smooth the arms onto the body, the tail onto the little Tasmanian devil butt, and we're just going to get everything really secured in place. Even though you are securing these in place with the brown acrylic, you're also going to want to add a little bit of clear acrylic under each of those pieces that is sculpted out, just to add strength. Once you are done with that, you're going to take some red and brush it over his belly, or what would appear to be his belly, for the inside of his mouth. So just sort of fill that in with red acrylic. Now, I did not wait before I started sculpting in the area surrounding his mouth to let the red really cure very well. And so I'm going to get a little bit of red mixed in with my tan, which is okay. It's not the biggest of issue, but it's one of those things where I just want to mention it, that especially if you have a red acrylic that is more prone to color bleed, you're going to want to do that and then wait. Or you could have done it and then sculpted the arms so that the whole time you're working on the arms, that's really curing. That would probably be the best bet, the best way to do it. Otherwise, if your red isn't that bad with color bleed, like the one I'm using isn't horrible, you can just kind of go right from one thing to the next. But if you're worried about that, that would be a way to correct that issue. It really depends. Red is one of the worst colors, though, for color bleed, and to blend in from one thing to the next, it really can get where everything you sculpt on top of red turns into kind of a muddy brown pink color, which isn't really what we want. So I'm going to take that tan color, and I'm going to sculpt the entire perimeter of Taz's mouth and then down his belly for the little bit of belly that shows, which is at about the same level as his tail. As you're sculpting this perimeter, you want to try to build up some height on it. You don't want it to be flat. You want it to actually have a ridge to it so that it really looks like his mouth. We're trying to, build up some 3D to this. We want it to really have that 3-dimensional height to it. So add a little bit more. I'm going to end up with more to that bottom lip so that really sticks out. And then he does have another layer of a snout that sticks out on the top. So we're going to add more to both of those sections specifically, but even down around the sides, you want it to have a definite height difference from the red to the tan. There's the rest of that lower lip that's going to kind of jut out. And then we're going to be adding that upper lip, snout, cheek, definitely not nozzle area. When you're doing that part, you're going to want to blend it back towards his face a little bit so it's not like a separate piece, but it looks a little bit more naturally smoothed down. And then as you're adding all of these things, you're just going to go through and you're going to keep looking to see where you can fix it. That's one of the biggest tips I can ever give somebody, is when you're working on something art-wise, regardless of what it is, even if it's like an abstract where you're making your own rules, periodically just take a step back and look at what you're doing and see if it looks right. Sometimes you can kind of get caught up in that I have to do this first, second, third, fourth, that you forget to verify that what you're doing is placed correctly or is the right size or whatever it might be that you find. And if you're in a rush, especially, or if you're the type of person that just is like go, go, go mentality, which I certainly am, then all of a sudden you can get to where you think, okay, I'm done. And then you really look at what you're doing and like, nope, I'm not done. I got to go back and I got to fix this, whatever it is. So we're going to be adding, I added Taz's ears, little ears kind of up above his cheeks. And then I'm going to be adding in his eyes, very angled, slanted eyes. He's got a crazy look on his face, which is per the usual for Taz. So we're going to be adding those eyes slanted very, very, very well in an angle. So it almost has a V between his eyes. And then we're also going to take that white and we're going to be adding his teeth. So don't put that away quite yet. You can add a little bit more definition to his forehead, like eyelids. You can sculpt in some eyebrows if you want. Otherwise, you can paint those later, whichever you prefer. But just add, just a little bit more. As much as you want to add, go for it. I'm going to be sculpting his tongue with pink. This is actually the same pink. I put just a touch of it inside of his ears. But it's a really really pretty, slightly shimmery pink color. Normally you wouldn't think of shimmer for Taz, but I think just that ever so slight shimmer, there's also a little bit of shimmer in the background of the snail, that orange color. And then on the tongue, it gives it just a little bit of glam that I think for nail art is not required or mandatory, but I think is appreciated, at least for me. Going back to Taz, I'm going to be adding black around his eyes, just a little bit with black acrylic. That is one of the things that if you would rather do with acrylic paint versus the L&P acrylic, you certainly could. And then after you have some of those details done and you're kind of getting down to where you're towards the end of it and you're looking at your design, have your reference photo and your nail sitting right next to each other and just go back through, make sure that you're not missing anything. Obviously, there are things that I'm still missing here. He needs a nose, he needs teeth. But there really isn't, that many of those other details that are left. If you want to give him pupils with acrylic, you can certainly do that. That is something I am going to paint in later. If there's just anything else that you want to do, now would be the time to do it. And with this particular design with Taz, there are different eras of Taz as far as the character development. So depending on how recent, the look is of him, there might be things that you need to sculpt in to make him look like that era versus if you're looking at an older one. Typically with any characters like this, if they've been around for a very long time, there's going to be a lot more detail in the new ones versus the old ones. And the only reason that would really matter as you're looking at it is if you're trying to go for a certain look or if there's a look that you just prefer. When you're finding reference photos, you need to make sure you find one that shows you exactly what it is that you're trying to do. So don't look at a very new photo of Taz and try to get a classic look or a more simple animation style out of it. I'm going to be adding in those teeth, and then I've got all that acrylic sculpting done on my Taz. So I'm going to go through with clear acrylic and I'm going to make the tornado. If you weren't doing it with a tornado, you would have stopped your Taz with a shorter nail so that you didn't have to do anything with his bottom or sculpt in his feet. Otherwise, if you are going to do the tornado element of this, you're going to take that clear acrylic and you're going to wrap it around him. So you're going to sculpt a long, thin strip of clear acrylic on a nail form backing. And once you can pick it up, you can... Normally, I don't like to manhandle acrylic with a hand, even a gloved hand, but this is one of those circumstances where it just is kind of the way it works. If you can just do it all with a brush, that would be fantastic. Otherwise, if like me, you're like, you know what, there's no way to do this, I'm just going to touch it. Make sure you're wearing gloves, and make sure if you are wearing gloves that you've been wearing for a while, you switch them out, because the longer you wear the gloves, most only have a 1 hour capacity for preventing chemical penetration. So if you've been wearing them and working for an hour plus, you're going to want to switch them out before you do anything where you're actually handling the acrylic. And even just, it's a good practice to switch them out pretty continually. If you're working on a client, rarely would you ever have gloves on for a full hour. So, or, I guess depending on the circumstance, but typically I would say you probably won't have them on for more than a full hour. So that is not really an issue because you'd switch them out between each client. But if you're doing something like this, where you're making something with acrylic and you kind of just have like an art mindset where it's less about getting a client in and out of the door, but more about making something, that hour can fly by really, really quickly. And so don't forget to switch your gloves when needed. But we're just going to go through and we're going to press these strips of clear acrylic back and forth, side to side. As you're going down the tip of the nail, try to get the circle that you're making with the clear acrylic thinner and thinner, or smaller and smaller, so that the tornado comes to a point or close to a point at the end of the nail or right past the end of the nail. You don't want it to maintain that thick width all the way down. The other thing that you can think about as you're doing this is that the tornado doesn't have to be like smooth circles going all the way down, forming a perfect cone shape. It can kind of shift side to side a little bit so that it looks just a little bit more chaotic. And that not only is it okay, it is preferred in this case to be a little bit chaotic. And that's, I think, easier to do something where it's, it's a little bit more freeing to not have to worry about being perfect with something. For this last strip, I'm going to wrap it around itself as tightly as I can, eventually just twisting the end of it so that it comes to that point on the end of the tornado, adding more clear acrylic between each of those strips as you go, so that, because they're pretty dry by the time you're putting them on there, they're not going to hold on to each other very well. So you really want to make sure you secure each one as you go. After you have it where your tornado goes all the way down, look through and see if there are any very large gaps. If there are some spaces where the gap is significant, make another smaller little strip of the clear acrylic and fill in those spaces. If you don't have any of those big gaps, or if you like the gaps, obviously just leave them there. But if you want to fill them in, I would think it's a good idea. And if you do plan to add the white striping like I did to my tornado, I would do it just so that the striping is supported underneath it. So when you have that, just go through, fill in all of those spaces, and then I'm going to detail my
my Taz with some acrylic paint before I do anything else to the tip of this nail. And we're just going to be adding little details here and there, some little polka dots on his cheeks for where his whiskers would be, pupils, outlines. There isn't a whole lot really if you sculpted as much as I did as far as detail goes that you need to do. I would make sure that his fingers are all well defined, little bits around his cheeks, add a little bit of fur texture. Anything that you want to do, obviously go through and do, but if it feels like you're happy with it, if you stop and you're like, you know what, he looks pretty good, then, you know, whatever you did is perfect, because if you're happy with it, that's really all that matters. So just add whatever detailing you feel necessary. If you are going to be doing detailing with black paint, I would recommend diluting it just slightly with some water so that it's a little easier to spread around. And then after you have that, I'm going to apply gel sealer over the background, cure, matte top coat over Mr. Taz, and then after that has air dried, because I'm using regular lacquer, I'm going to use white spider gel, and I'm going to add some of that, we're going to use the word chaotic again, some chaotic white stripes all over that tornado. Once that's been cured, as long as your your spider gel doesn't require top coat, this nail is done. He is so cool. Really, I will put links to both of those past Taz videos in the description box below. Highly recommend a check, even if you just look at the quality of them and that's it. Enjoy and get a good laugh, and I'll see you guys next time. Bye.